to the listeners and viewers of the Real Stuff podcast. Today is our first show in our new season, and we have today with us the Reverend Peter Espeut, and he's going to talk to us about the different type of schools in Jamaica and about the educational system. So back to you, Flavius,
Yeah,
and our guest.
last time Peter was here, we just touched on it, and he promised to come back, and give us a full outlay of this topic. And he's back now, and I'm so happy because I found out I didn't know much about the schools in Jamaica, how they were developed, or who owns them, who created them, and apparently there are a number of different kinds of schools. So Peter, it's all over to you.
So let me get started. Gentlemen, thank you for the invitation. It's always important, I think, for us to understand where we are, because we're born on Common Sea, Jamaica, but we don't really know how we got here. And most of the times we're not happy with what we see, but we don't know how we got here, and so it's hard to go forward. I think it must have been the Honorable Marcus who said that we really had to understand where we're coming from if we are going to know where we're going. Well, the first schools in Jamaica were not intended for Black people. The first schools in Jamaica were basically, you would have to call them kindergarten schools for the children of the planters. But the plan was that as soon as they reach a certain age, they would send them back to England or Scotland to go to high school. So actually, the first high school in Jamaica started in 1850. Can you believe that? But the first primary school probably started around 1820. And that school was started by the Moravian Church near to today in St. Elizabeth, between Alligator Pond and Junction.
Okay.
That part of St. Elizabeth. And thereafter, because remember, those churches came to Jamaica. The Moravian Church, then the Baptist Church, the Methodist Church. I give it in the wrong order. Moravian Church, Methodist Church, Baptist Church came to Jamaica to convert Black people to Christianity. And part of that had to do with reading, because those churches, most churches, hold the Bible to be the revealed word of God. And it's very important for Christians to be able to read the Bible for themselves. Believe it or not, the Anglican Church, which was here much, much, much earlier, the Anglican Church came from the 1600s. The Anglican Church did not start schools for Black people at all in that period. So after the Moravians, as I said, the Baptists, the Methodists started schools for Black people, and they didn't have to pay a lot, but it was a small. In those days, we're talking farden and penny and tuppence. Those schools, often the school was in the church, and the same minister, the minister's wife, sometimes there would be other missionaries who would come to be the teachers. Other churches eventually, the Anglican Church, the Catholic Church didn't come back to Jamaica until 1791 because it had been banned and made illegal by the Anglican Queen, King and Queen. But they also started schools when they came. So basically the government, when we say the government in slavery, we're talking about the plantocracy, we're talking about the Jamaica House of Assembly. They did not start any schools. They didn't start any schools until way in the 1880s, when after the Morant Bay Rebellion and the abolition, really, I'll have to say, of the House of Assembly. So I'll have to take that back. The House of Assembly, all the time that it existed, up to it was abolished in 1867. The House of Assembly did not start any schools, not one. It was the churches that started schools and private people who, a lady might start a school on her veranda to earn money because people wanted their children to go to school. Are we talking about the slave children, but also free children? And then after emancipation, we're talking about white, brown, and black. So it is only well after the Morant Bay Rebellion that the government of the day decided that we had to have schools. So what they did was they looked around, they started with high schools, and they realized that there were very few high schools in Jamaica. I told you that the first high school was 1850. That was a school called St. George's College. I don't know if any of you ever heard of St. George's College. That was the first high school in Jamaica. Now, there were earlier schools like Woolmer's and Rossi's, but they were not high schools. Today, they are high schools. Today, you have Woolmer's boys and Woolmer's girls, and you have Rossi's, and you have Manchester High. These are schools that started long before 1850. But they did not start as high schools. They started as academies. They would go from primary up to about grade 9 and stop, because the children who went to those schools would largely have been the elite children, and they would go to England. So you didn't have a school going all the way to the end of what today we call fifth form. It was the Catholic Church that started that in 1850, and then pretty soon the Presbyterian Church followed with a school called the Collegiate School in Kingston on Kirk Avenue, right opposite Scottskirk. And then after that, the Woolmer School, which had been in existence for a long time, but not as a high school. The Woolmer School added a secondary department to its curriculum to become a high school. Because the thing was, they didn't like Catholics then, just like they don't like them now. And if Catholic boys and girls are going to high school, and there's no other high school in the country, when they graduate and they apply for jobs, they're going to get the jobs over the other denominations. And so pretty quickly, when it was realized that Catholics were going to get an advantage over others, especially in the civil service, the other denominations quickly started high schools. And as I said, Woolmer's responded, and ultimately other schools also started, other denominations started to have. But you also had trusts. So Titchfield was a trust. Woolmer's was trust. Rossi's was trust. Monroe and Dickinson Trust had 2 schools, Hampton and Monroe. And again, this is not government. This is a private man leaves in his will so much £1,000 to start a school, and the school started. So the government now around 1880 says, we have a problem. Some parts of Jamaica don't have any school. And so they look, for example, at St. James, big Montego Bay, biggest town in the West, has no school. And so they started a school called Cornwall College. It is true that they put an Anglican to be the first headmaster, the Reverend Leader. I'm sure you've heard of Leader Avenue.
Oh, yes.
And he was the first headmaster. And then after that, they started the Montego Bay High School for girls. Again, even though it was not an Anglican school, it was a government school. The Anglican Church provided the people that ran it. Certainly the chairman of the board was an Anglican clergyman. Just like the Woolmer's schools had Anglicans as their headmasters and so on. So let's fast forward to independence. So we come to independence now and we find that we have a total of 41 high schools in the country. 41 high schools. Only 41 high schools. And since the 20th century, well, let's take a parish like Portland. Portland had 2 high schools in the year 1900, and at independence in 62, they had the same 2 high schools. Titchfield High School in Port Antonio and Happy Grove High School near Mansion Hill, there in Portland, in East Portland.
East, yeah, more the east, yes.
East Portland. Montego Bay had the same 2 high schools, Cornwall College and Mobay High School for girls. Not true. There was a Catholic high school called Mount Alverde High School. So here you have Montego Bay now has 2 high schools for girls and 1 for boys. But look at the next parish, Trelawney. Trelawney had 1 high school called Westwood High School. This was for girls only. Again, started by a church. It started actually by a Baptist minister and the Methodists. They joined together. So imagine that, a boy to go to. Suppose he wants to go to school in St. James. There's only 1 boys' school in St. James, but all the boys in St. James are fighting to go to that school. What about the other parish next door, the parish of St. Anne? Parish of St. Anne had 1 high school, well, 2 really, in Brownstown, and they are both for girls. St. Hilda's High School and again, I use that was because deal with that there should be no high school in a sugar area, and so that's why Trelawney had no high school, because Trelawney, as everybody knows, was a big sugar parish in those days. Today, Trelawney still has 2 sugar estates, and is one of the biggest sugar places, and rum for that matter. So Brownstown was another big sugar parish, which is why I had no school for boys. And Portland, as everybody should know, was not a really big sugar parish. Certainly there was no sugar around Port Antonio, and no sugar around the East Portland Mansion Hill, where Happy Grove School was. Clarendon had sugar down in Vere, so therefore you couldn't have a high school in Vere. So the high school that was in Clarendon was up in Chapelton. Now you had a little sugar up in Chapelton, that is true. You have Danks and you have a couple of other places up there. But basically, you could get away with just having one high school there in Chapelton. The whole of Vere, what today we call Monimuska, New Yarmouth, you didn't want to have high school down there because that is going to cause problems with Cane. I could go on, but I think you're getting the point. Westmoreland, another big sugar parish. Yes, you have a school called Manning's, started by a William Manning, a slave owner. But again, it didn't want black people in it. It was only for brown people and white people. So what I'm saying is, brothers and sisters who are listening, is that in the very early days, it was a plan to restrict certainly black men, but to a lesser extent, black women from going to high school. And that is why the 41 high schools that we had at Independence were mostly for girls. There were 7 high schools only for boys only, and 14 high schools for girls only. Count them for yourself. The schools for boys only were very few. Calabar, Casey, JC, Wilmer's Boys, the Carteret, Monroe, and one more whose name escaping for the moment. I hope somebody not going to kill me. Which one?
George's.
St. George's. How could I have left out St. George's? Mea culpa. Mea culpa. 7 schools for boys only and 14 schools for girls. And all the others were what we say co-ed, boys and girls. But when you check the number of boys to the number of girls, there were twice as many girls in the school as boys. So a school I taught at, St. Mary's College in Above Rocks, again, no sugar is up there, so you can have a high school in the bush like that. There were twice as many girls going to St. Mary's College as boys. And most of the other schools that were co-ed were like that. And so basically what the independence government of Jamaica inherited was a high school situation with 41 schools with most of the places being provided, 2/3 of the places for girls and 1/3 of the places for boys. The plan was that black boys must go to Cane. So you must give them what they call a practical education. You want them to read and write a little, but not plenty. You want them to be able to check, but not plenty. But basically, you don't want them to get ideas. So the plan really is for them to cut cane or weed banana or pick coffee or something like that. When you look at the primary system, the government operated today, well, at that time, what we call all-age schools. An all-age school went from grade 1 to grade 9, didn't go beyond grade 9. Why did the government stop at grade 9? Because if it went to 10 and 11, that would be high school. And then they would have to take, in those days it was GCE. And after GCE, you could go university. But you didn't want ordinary poor black people to do that. So you stopped the school at grade 9, elementary school. You had, and that was government. So after you reach grade 9, the vast majority of Jamaican boys and girls stopped going to school unless you could take the common entrance, which started in the 50s. Unless you could take the common entrance and go to a high school, a private school. So they're all private, but the government gave some scholarships. Your school career came to an end at grade 9. So along comes independence. The independence government says, well, we can't let this continue. We have to have more secondary schools. So they went to the World Bank. This is the JLP government of the 1960s. And they borrowed millions of dollars to build 80 schools at the secondary level. Now, They had a choice. You can build 80 schools like George's and Monroe and Alpha and so on. You can build 80 schools like that. Or you can build a lower kind of high school. And that's what they decided to do. They built what they call junior secondary schools. So they did not want to increase the number of high schools because that will defeat the purpose. You see, even in 1962 at independence, sugar was still a big thing. Bananas, coffee, cocoa, citrus, pimento were still the mainstay of the economy. And you didn't want to have all these black people going to high school. So they would go to a junior secondary school, like Papine Junior Secondary, Mona Junior Secondary, all the places in the country that didn't have high school. So even Port Antonio, you had Port Antonio Junior Secondary. You have Anota Bay Junior Secondary. You build all of these junior secondary schools. But they did not go all the way to grade 11 either. They also stopped before. They stopped at grade 10. So you could not take GCE. And also, who went to those schools? To get into a high school, you had to pass the common entrance. To get into one of these junior secondary schools, basically, I'm sorry to put it this way, but those who fail the common entrance, they would go to these schools. And so from then, you get an apartheid in the education. Well, I shouldn't say from then, because we had it before. There were these private high schools, or you went to all-age schools. So we had it before. But now after independence, instead of, you know, the song at that time was, "We're out to build a new Jamaica." The new Jamaica would have been a Jamaica where every black boy and girl could go to high school. That was not a new Jamaica that they planned in 1962. And they borrowed the money from the World Bank and built 60 or 80 of these junior secondary schools, so that what they call the traditional high schools, like George's and KC and JC, those were for the I'm trying to be polite. the high collar people and the better off people, the elite. But the ordinary black Jamaican would go to, they didn't have primary school in those days. You go to all-age school and then the second. So what they did was they chop off the head off of some of the all-age schools. So they used to go up to grade 9, but they take off 7, 8, and 9 and turn them into primary schools. And then the 7, 8, and 9, they put them somewhere else and add 10 and call it junior secondary. And that was what happened at independence. So I consider that, and I've written about it many times in my column, I consider that a betrayal of the Jamaican people. You promise independence, you promise a new Jamaica, but you don't deliver a new Jamaica. So 25 years after independence, I told you that at independence there were 41 high schools. 25 years after independence, that is 25 plus 62 would be 1987. By 1987, we had 44 high schools. Can you believe that?
Just 3 more.
Yes. So one dropped out. I don't know if any of you ever heard of a high school called Texas Branch College.
No.
It was based in Malden, St. James. It was by the Baptist Church. In fact, the person who started that school was the father of a very well-known Jamaican economist who has his place in Trenchtown. He has a column in the newspaper sometimes. I don't know why his name is escaping me.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I know him. Oh, what's his name again? Oh. Dr.
Henry Morgan.
Henry Morgan went to Arden.
Morgan's father.
Yeah, man. I know Henry Morgan well.
Henry Morgan's father, who started Malden, the school in Malden called Texas Branch College, which was affiliated to a Baptist school in the United States. That one fell out and 4 new ones came in. So even though it went from 41 to 44, and you're correct, there were a net increase of 3.
Yeah.
Actually, 1 dropout and 4 came in. Who were the 4? These were 4 schools that were private before, and the government made them grant-aided. And so they now were brought into the government system, but they are still private. Who are they? Campion is one.
Campion, yeah.
School I went to. Arden, the Carteret High, which was private, and the 4th one again escaped. But I'm sure somebody will call out and remind me what the 4th one was. But so basically, what's that?
Queens?
It could be Queens. I mean, it could be Queens. So that basically now, 25 years after independence, so we went through 10 years of a JLP government, 10 years of a PNB government, and 5 years of another JLP government under Siaga, and we still only have 3 new net schools. So you can't say it's just the JLP alone that caused the problem, because the PNP, when they were in power, they didn't create any new high schools either. So basically, there has not been consensus in the country that every poor Black child must have the opportunity of going to high school. So after that now, what Siaga did was he said, okay, we're going to abolish this difference between high and secondary. So Mona Secondary was renamed Mona High. Papine Secondary was renamed Mona High. Setola Park changed from secondary to high. All of these high schools all over Jamaica that were called secondary, all of a sudden they were now called high. In church circles, we might call that rebaptism. Right? But in fact, I was chairman of one of them, Holy Trinity Secondary on George Henley Drive, was renamed George Henley Holy Trinity High. No different teachers, no new labs, no new anything, no new classroom, no nothing. Them just change the name. So in actual fact, Holy Trinity High was no different to Holy Trinity Secondary, only the name. I was chairman of the board, powerless to do anything about it. But you see, cosmetics. And today, still, there is the distinction between the traditional high, because no parent really chooses these old secondary schools over the old ones. Everybody still wants to send their children to Campion and Immaculate and Alpha and so on. So actually, if you check the ranking of high schools in Jamaica, look at the top 30 high schools according to the ranking, you will see that only 2 of them are government. And that is Montego Bay High.
All right, go on.
And again, somebody is talking in the background there. Montego Bay High, and I can't remember what the other one is. But basically, the trust schools and the church schools have maintained a high quality, whereas the government-owned and run schools have, which are mostly schools that were called junior secondary or secondary before, are below the standard.
Struggling.
Struggling, and I would say struggling,
Yeah.
So some people say that it's a vicious circle, because the children in Jamaica get to choose the school they want to go to. It's not like in the United States, where if you live in this neighborhood, you go to the school in your neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just that. And they provide you with bus transport to go there and so on and so on. You don't have a choice. But in Jamaica, it don't work like that because, first of all, there may be no school in your community. And secondly, the school in your community might be one of these struggling schools. So you don't want your child to go to that school. So you want your child to go to Campion or George's or Immaculate or something like that. So if you live in Yallas or in Mavis Bank or in Old Harbour or in Stony Hill, it don't matter. You are going to prefer that your child take 3 buses to school rather than to take 1 bus to the school, the nearest school, which may be a struggling school.
Sleep on the bus,
Sleep
going
on
and
the bus.
coming. Yeah.
When I was teaching at St. Mary's College, at the time I lived in town. And I would have to take a bus to Constant Spring and then take the Grey Line country bus from there up to Above Rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, even by that time, the bus packed up with picnic. And it was standing around, and then, you know, they wouldn't even give them teacher a seat. I stand up, hold on to the rail.
Yeah.
I would cross my knee and rest back. And yes, I would sleep. I would catch a little nap from Constant Spring, Stony Hill, all the way up to Parks Road. And we had to come off the bus at Parks Road in those days. No. If we take Grey Line, we come off at School Gate. But if we take the 32 JOS, we would come off at Parks Road and have to walk a couple of miles from there to the school. So, and this is what many children in Jamaica have to do, as you guys apparently know.
Mm-hmm.
So the education system we got was born in slavery, grow up after emancipation, but under colonialism, such that those that ran the country didn't want black people to go to good high schools. They would rather them cut cane. After independence, the so-called Independence Jamaican political parties, we do away with the Englishman and we run our own country. We run it the same way as we ran it with the Englishman. Why? Because the country, you could have a black-looking politician as the prime minister, but the hand that draw the string behind him is the man that owned Money Musk and Froome and Bernard Lodge and Sahamden and Long Pond and Worthy Park. So that in actual fact, the economy was being run to provide labor for the plantation, the agricultural sector. And you really couldn't have too many black people going to high school. What has changed? Well, we switched from being an agricultural economy, mostly, and we say we want to industrialize. So we have all kind of screwdriver factories and assembly plants and so on. So we have something called industry now. But the industry still wants unskilled labor or lightly skilled labor, factory workers. Again, if somebody can read and write and check and all of that, they're not going to go and work on a factory. So again, since your economy is that kind of economy, you don't want to have a highly educated workforce. So nowadays, the government is announcing new jobs in BPO. What is BPO? Call centers.
Key punching.
Key punching.
Yeah.
They must be able to type a little.
Yeah, read a little.
Read a little, well spoken. But this is barely above minimum wage, you know.
Yeah, it is, yes.
But things like coding now, we hear the government starting with coding, which means we want to develop software and so on, which is good. But what I'm trying to say, gentlemen and ladies who are listening, is that the structure of the Jamaican economy has hardly changed really over the last 200 years. We still want to encourage a large, basically lightly educated majority who will work in these industries and still on the plantations. And we will have a small number of excellent high schools that are ready for the white and brown people, the Chinese and so on. And then the vast majority of high schools are going to be these struggling schools where, frankly, the children are going to grade 7 in these high schools. Many of them can't read and write, I don't want to call any names. But a friend of mine who teaches in one of these schools tells me that in September gone, when they took in their cohort in grade 7, 80% of them were not reading at grade 7, they were reading at grade 4.
Wow.
It's a problem. And these schools will say, but you see, Campion don't have this problem. Picking them not go to Campion are all, them have to get 95 or more in GSAT or whatever them call it nowadays, PEP, before you go to Campion or Immaculate. So you don't find any illiterate children in grade 7 at Campion, but you will find illiterate children in the old junior secondary and high schools, junior and secondary schools. So therefore they say, when Campion comes #1 in the country and Immaculate, is it because Campion and Immaculate are the best schools? Or is it that they get the best picnic who can do better than get A? So it's a vicious circle. You give them A students with PEP, they come out in 5th form, 6th form, topping CXC, topping CAPE, because they went in that way. Whereas the other schools that get the what left picnic, and they can't pass 3 subjects. You said the school is a bad school, but the school may not be a bad school at all. If you put the 95% children, people who get 95% in PEP in those schools, they might do just as good. So we have a system that we would say in Jamaica, gone by the morning. Gone by the morning. How is it going to change? Because the good schools like Campion and Immaculate are not going to want to take illiterate children. And those schools, if you look in the geography, you will notice that around Immaculate, they have some inner city, I don't want to call them ghetto, but the picking them from those inner cities can hardly get to go to Immaculate because they don't have the grades. When you say, okay, tomorrow we are going to change the system, people are going to go to high school in their community where they live. So Chambers Lane and Standpipe and Sandy Park children are going to go to Campion. And Grants Pen and Cassava Peace children are going to go to Immaculate. And pretty soon, and all the Barbican children are going to go to Papine High, and Hope Pastor's children are going to go to Mona High. That is going to cause riot in the country. So we're kind of stuck with the system that we have, where we have an apartheid, where we have good schools and bad schools. And they are so because, of course, the churches do operate good schools. The schools like that I've named schools from my own church, Campion, Immaculate, Holy Childhood, George's, Alpha in Kingston, Mount Alvernia in Mobay, Marymount in Highgate, Mount St. Joseph in Mandeville, St. Vincent Stramby in Bull Savannah. Schools like these are top class schools. They rank very high, and people want to go there. So the best children go there, and those who can't get to go there have to go elsewhere. and it perpetuates the system. So when we look at the primary level now, we see that you have prep schools. You have prep schools like Immaculate Prep, you have Alvernia Prep, you have Stella Maris Prep, you have St. Teresa's Prep. These are good prep schools. Wolmer's Prep, St. Andrew Prep. Children who go to these schools, there are about 13 a class. They might have 2 teachers in the class, one who is a trained teacher, one who is an assistant teacher, not trained, but so that the children in the class get personalized attention. Everybody who goes to these prep schools learn to read and write, quick. And whereas in the primary school, you tell me if I'm wrong, you have 40, 50, 60 children in a class with one teacher. It used to be that the teacher was called pre-trained, which is another word for untrained, but you can't call them untrained, so you call them pre-trained. But nowadays, I understand that there are hardly any pre-trained teachers in the system. Most of the primary school teachers are in fact trained. But you still have 60 in a class with one teacher, and they put all the girls in the front and the boys in the back. So the girls get the special attention and the boys throw playing and make noise in the back. It disadvantages the boys. So the girls do better than the boys. And the girls get to go to the high school anyway, and the boys don't get to go. So we have an education system, despite what the feminists want to tell you, how the women are so oppressed. The fact of the matter is that in Jamaica, women are supported by the education system to do better than the boys. And there are more high school places for girls than boys. 2/3, as I told you already. And is it any wonder that a university like UWI has 80% women and only 20% men? The men don't get a chance to go to university because they can't pass the exams. The university pack up with women. So these poor women now want husband. Where them going to get the husband from? They're going to take illiterate young man and them have university degree. So as a result, you have a lot of unmarried women, professional women with master's degree who can't find husband because they're none. Jamaican men, many of them can't read and write. It is in my church in Denham Town, Hannahtown. I have young boys and girls. All the girls are doing well, go to high school, do well. None of the, one or two of the boys do well, go to George's and so on. But most of the boys go Denham Town and so on. And then they're struggling in school. The girls are doing well. So how can I look forward to the girls from my church marrying the boys from my church when the boys in my church not doing as well as the girls? You see what I'm saying? But this is the Jamaica that we have inherited. And all the governments since independence come along and say they're going to improve, but none have improved it. So you change from junior secondary to new secondary. Then you change from new secondary to secondary. Then you change from secondary, you call them high. And it's the same school.
But what can we do today? What can we do today to change that, to rectify that?
I don't know who's asking the question, but you know, the fact is this. Flavius, I can analyze the problem, you know, but I am not an education expert. And far be it from me to give any way forward. I mean, obviously the way forward has to be that we have to start with early childhood. Every child, when they reach grade 1, must be ready for grade 1. Now, in the early childhood, they don't teach them to read, you know. So I'm not expecting them to read, but I'm expecting them to be ready. I'm expecting them to be able to focus, to be disciplined, to learn how to stay quiet, to be able to work together. In other words, have the right mental attitude. So that when they reach grade 1, The grade 1 teachers are ready now to start them to read and to check, to do math and other subjects. So that ultimately, when they get to grade 6, everybody can read and write. And instead of only 6% can read and write. But they, I say that they do it in Barbados, they do it in Trinidad, they do it in Grenada. Why is it that Jamaica can't do it? Why is it that we are the most illiterate Caribbean island? Why?
That we are. Yeah, but you just laid out all the reasons. Way. Yeah. Mm.
It is planned that way. So you're going to shut down the sugar industry. That is fine. But then your education system is geared to produce cane cutters. So if you know you're going to shut down the sugar industry and give it to the Chinese, then you have to change your education system. So Ver has Vertech, and it has Garvey Maceo, and it has Watson High School in Lionel Town, and it has a couple of other high schools. I think I'm trying to remember the names of some of them. But the fact is that we still have the best schools where there are no plantations. We've got to start with, we have got to convert some of these old secondary schools into top class high schools like Campion. Now, it could be, brothers and sisters, that the government can't do it. The government does run a good high school at Mobay High. It does run a good high school at Cornwall College, although Cornwall College don't rank very high. Part of the reason it doesn't rank very high is because a lot of these schools are importing athletes so that they will win champs and Manning Cup. But the athletes that they're importing can't read and write much. And it draws down the average of the school. But still what I'm saying is, maybe the government just does not have the ethos to run a good quality high school. But the Anglican Church does, because they run St. Hugh's and they run good high schools in Brownstown and all over the St. Hilda's, as I mentioned. Bishop's High School, that's the other one in Bishop Gibson High School.
Yeah.
The other one I couldn't remember. There's the one in Mandeville. I think that one is Bishop Gibson.
Yeah.
So the Baptist Church runs Calabar. The Methodist Church runs Meadowbrook. And the Church of God runs Merle Grove and Arden. So you have the churches can run these schools, but the government run schools that are not of the same quality.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to ask yourself, can government run a good high school? We've already found out that maybe they can't run a good public service company, so we have to send it to the private sector. They can't run a good, what else am I going to say? Can they run a good bus company? Can they run a good water commission? Can they run a good high school? Maybe the government should say to the churches, please take over some of my schools for me, because you will run them better. But I just don't, the way forward has to be top class early childhood education, top class primary education, and then you will have top class children to go to secondary schools. And maybe when you send these top class children to the rebranded high schools, they will raise the standard of the rebranded high schools to the same level as Campion. And then it won't matter whether you go to Campion, Mona, Papine, Marcus Garvey, or Norman Manley. It won't matter which of these high schools you go to, because they're all the same quality. I don't know. But whereas I'm happy to come and talk to you about what we have, I don't know if I'm the best person, brethren, to tell you the best way to go forward because I really am not an education expert. I'm a sociologist.
We thank you very much. And he has opened our minds tremendously.
Well, thank you for having me. I've chatted for an hour.
Yes.
I have listened. And I'm hoping to hear what your listeners,
yes,
how your listeners
we will
respond
get that back
to
to
what
you.
I'm saying. Thank you very much.
I'm seeing a gentleman here. I don't know who he is. Could you speak to us?
I saw him a long time. He can maybe introduce himself.
Yeah.
Waiter.
Yeah, you, yeah. Yeah.
Felton. Peter.
Okay, Felton. Oh, yes.
Is this the Felton called Henriquez?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful.
I believe it.
I think I know this gentleman.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So you want to say a few words before we close? Because we're about to close now.
Yeah, I know you're going to close, but I was just thinking, I noticed that Peter left out, and I don't know if it's deliberate, but the technical schools, them.
But there's so few of them, Felton.
I know it's a few of them. It's
I mean, to say if we need 100 high schools, there are only 7 technical schools in the country.
Right.
That's all? Whoa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
4 more than only 7. They make the one St. Thomas Technical, the one in Hampton Court, has become St. Thomas Technical. But largely only 7 technical schools in the country.
Right, and those schools were doing good where boys were concerned at one time. Now I find out even Kingston Technical, more girls are there than used to be. Technical
you see, that's how it goes.
Yeah, and the St. Andrew Tech too, at the Bumper Hall. There's a lot of girls when they pass, there are a lot of girls coming out. And
Felton, the problem is, when you put the GSAT PEP common entrance at 11 years old, psychologists tell us that at 11 years old, girls are much more mature than boys.
Boys, yeah.
So the girls will always do better. The girls will always outperform the boys, and therefore the girls will always get the best places. And the boys will get the what left.
Don't it?
Huh?
The technical exams were different.
Yeah, and the technical exam is, yeah, but you see, if you fail the GSAT,
that's when you go technical.
And then at age 11, then at age 12 now, you take a technical entrance. But the girl's still better at the technical entrance. So if the girl didn't get to go into high, the girl is going to get to go into technical.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And the system is skewed in favor of girls that way.
Yeah.
But gentlemen, thank you very much.
Yes,
yeah,
thank you very much. Courtney, you want to close off for us?
Okay. Well, we've come to the close of the Real Stuff podcast. And our special guest, Peter Espeut, he spoke on the educational system. And, that was really quite, thought-provoking, I would say now, thesis that he has given us about this whole thing. And I think, one of the things, Peter, I think that you had mentioned, and Jamaica should look seriously at it, is about the zonal way of, schooling, because it would make sense, because, parents have to pay a whole lot for transportation, plus, it would cut down turnovers for school, because sometimes, people, the children will be going to school late, doing all kind of things, and that doesn't make sense. But we are so happy to have you here today to discuss this, and hope we can get kick the ball a little further by asking our viewers and listeners to participate in some kind of survey or put something out there, because we talk about the problems, but we really need solutions. And so we thank you very much. Thank you to Felton for being a visitor and a guest on the program too. So, we haven't seen each other for a long time. But
Yeah.
sorry that I couldn't be on video and all of that. So thank
Gentlemen,
you
thank you. I
again.
gotta run now.
Oh yes,
Okay,
yes,
Peter.
yeah.
All
We
the
are
best to you
definitely
now.
closing now. So
And you
Okay.
can carry on in my absence.
yeah,
All the best
until
to you.
next time. We
Happy to come another time. Felton, hope I see you soon.
Yes, very
great.
soon.
Thank
Happy
you
New
very
Year
much,
to
Reverend.
everybody too.
Bye.
You lead us song fulla. You belong far away away. Ajugwala lebo buseru. Leader mua, leader song fulla. Leader mua, leader song fulla.
Well, unfortunately, this is it. Till next time. Bless.
All you gotta do is just speak. One word is enough, and I'm no longer so rough. I forget what I was trying to say. I no longer do what I was gonna do, but you're no good for me. That's why me know what set me a figure flee. Me I fi take away me say. Me I fi take away me say. Me I fi hide like a thief in the night. Me I fi get out of sight. Me I fi take away myself. I fi take away myself. I have to utilize I will.